I am Dan Costa, editor-in-chief of PCMag.com, and welcome to Fast Forward, where we have ongoing conversations about living in the future. We have a very special show for you today. My guest is Liza Kindred. Liza is the founder of Third Wave Fashion, a consultancy that helped create and really define the fashion technology industry and the fashion technology segment. We're going to talk about wearable technology, we're going to talk about the role of fashion and design, and we're talking about how the fashion industry is operating in this hyper-connected world that we live in. I'm sure that we're going to talk about Instagram as well, which is sort of my portal into the high fashion industry. But thanks so much for stopping by the lab.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. And hi, everyone online.
Indeed. We're live on Facebook. If you've got questions, ask those questions in the bottom of the comment section. Social Zach is in there. He will filter those questions. He will ask them to us live. If you are listening to this later on YouTube or on the website, obviously we will not be able to respond to your questions live because that is not how live works. So Fashion Week, I was going to say Fashion Week just wrapped up, but it just wrapped up here in New York.
And here in New York, yeah.
And it's moving around.
Yeah, Fashion Week is actually a month long. It goes between cities. It goes to Milan, it goes to Paris, but in New York, where we believe we live in the center of the universe, or at least we behave like that sometimes, Fashion Week is finished. That's right.
So we cover fashion technology at PCMag. We cover wearables all the time, all year round. We cover fashion technology when it's Fashion Week, and we send people to the show. This year, it seemed a little disappointing from a technology perspective.
Yeah, that's interesting. Disappointing. So one of the main things that changed this year, as opposed to some of the most recent years, is that there's no longer a partnership happening between the CFDA, which is the Council of Fashion Designers of America, who puts on the official Fashion Week. Their partnership with Intel is not happening anymore.
Ah, coincidentally,
yeah.
A little less technology this year.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, Intel has dissolved their fashion group and kind of absorbed them into some of the other groups. And so that partnership isn't going on anymore. And so we're not kind of seeing that big push that's at the forefront. But I would say that technology has completely upended Fashion Week. So even though we weren't necessarily seeing things as much on the runways, the entirety of Fashion Week and fashion weeks in general has changed because of technology. The fashion industry is in this, some would say, crisis because of this idea that's called see now, buy now, which basically means that people are buying what's being shown on the runways, as opposed to for so long, people would have to wait 6 months or however many months for whatever is on the runway to actually come into a store. And so now, tons of designers and department stores are trying to figure out, when we show something on the runway, everyone posts it on Instagram, all these influencers maybe get samples of the items. By the time it's in the store 6 months later, is there so much fatigue in seeing our cool new designs that people don't want to buy it anymore? And so a lot of designers are trying to figure out when to actually be shipping the clothes that they're showing on the runway.
It's really interesting because you think about, the whole fashion industry was generally around a print cycle, and you'd have the fall line and the spring line, and there'd be months between when these things would be shown and then when they would actually be shipped.
Right.
And now you're saying that whole thing is collapsed and people want to buy now. And if they don't build it and ship it now, somebody's going to copy it
Always.
And ship their version
Yeah,
of
the
it.
fast fashion, the Zaras and the Forever 21s and H&Ms of the world, they knock off stuff from the higher end designers and even from indie designers now, we're seeing. And they have it in the stores in like 2 weeks. Insane time to market. They won't see something, it'll be like a completely blank slate, and in 2 weeks they'll have it in stores, which is an incredible thing to do on the back end. But that's another thing, another technological advance, if you will, that is pushing the fashion industry out of its comfort zone and having to change things entirely.
So can you talk a little bit about that that's the manufacturing model that's gotten transformed. Rapid prototyping, but rapid prototyping and then at scale where they'll ship out and build thousands of garments and send them all over the country.
Yeah, very quickly. And so some of the most interesting innovations that are happening in fashion are actually happening on the back end and are happening behind the scenes in ways that consumers won't see. I think a lot of times when we think of fashion tech, we think of either wearables or maybe a dress that lights up on the runway.
The technology elements, and I think it's interesting that Intel may have had something to do with this, incorporating the technology into the runways seemed a little forced a lot of times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why are we shooting this with drones when we're surrounded by photographers?
Why not? Because drones are there. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's been an interesting thing that's happened with fashion and with technology, in that for a long time, the brands that people wanted and the money that, let's say, teenagers were spending was going into fashion. I myself, when I was spending money as a teenager, I was spending it on certain brands of clothing. Like I wanted some Pepe jeans and like an Esprit bag. I don't know. Like, I'm sure anyone else that was born in 1978 is like, yes, I wanted that too. But right now, my daughter, who is a teenager, is not at all interested in fashion brands. She is interested in expressing herself, how she looks, and trends, but she could give a care about what the brands are. She's more interested in making sure that she has the latest gadgets.
Because it enables her lifestyle in a way that clothing may or may not.
And she's able to have expression as well. So whereas before we might be expressing ourselves through our clothing, now, you know, she is very expressive on Snapchat, you know, or through these other different kinds of platforms. And so there's actual dollars that are moving from being spent on fashion to being spent on technology. And so that's something that fashion is really trying to grapple with, is how do we compete with this? How do we embrace this? And so what happens is we have a lot of these like slapped on partnerships where, you know, you find drones on the runway or your dress lights up, you know, and that's not necessarily something that consumers are demanding. It's marketing.
Yeah, Google Glass made its epic debut during Fashion Week, and it turned out to be a disaster, which I wish somebody had asked me in advance, like whether or not this was a good idea. This was never going to belong on the runway, and by forcing it up there, they really highlighted all of the device's weaknesses and none of its strengths.
You know, it's interesting. I know the people that worked on that partnership and made that decision, and they don't see it as an epic fail. I learned by asking how they felt about their epic fail. But they see it as they wanted to test the market, and they tested the market, and they see it as a successful test, even though...
It was a beta product. Like, I mean, you know, when Snapchat did the same thing with spectacles, and they limited demand, I mean, it was a beta, and it wasn't never going to scale. It was something they were doing to see how it would work.
Right. But don't you feel like Snapchat was a little more clear about that?
Very clear. Well, they had a negative example. They had something to learn from.
Right.
So they knew they weren't going to do what Google did.
Yeah, absolutely. But talking about that, I think there's so many wearables these days to the detriment of the entire industry where people are putting out prototypes and calling them products. And I think you see this, you know this full well, because this is something that you focus on so much. But there's so many companies that are out there that I don't know if it's a rush to market or what it is, but so many times we're seeing companies, and not just little companies, not just small brands, not just Kickstarters, but big companies putting products out there. The Google Glass is a great example. That was always meant to just be a prototype and something to play with, but they kind of, I don't know, pretend that it's for sale. Yeah. Do you see this?
And they try and build up mass market appeal and make it cool. And you wouldn't need to do that if you were just going to test a prototype or a beta.
Right.
Is there anybody that you know that's doing it well, that's really got some technological innovation, but also a sense of fashion, a sense of utility for the user?
Oh my gosh, I feel like that changes from season to season and from month to month. I mean, some of the things that I'm the most interested in, as you know, are things that focus on more mindful technology. And that comes from a place of having done work on wearables for so long and seen where it can really go awry and where the problems are. I'm really interested in companies that are using technology to help facilitate normal human interactions and normal human lives, and aren't trying to augment us into something crazy and different. One of my favorite examples of that is a company called Ringly. Have you reviewed them?
We have.
Yeah, I love them.
We've actually had people on the show that have been wearing Ringly.
That's great.
So I've actually seen it in the wild.
That is an awesome example, because there's so many times when we read about things over and over again, you never see that stuff in the wild.
I'm shocked to see it.
Ever.
Maybe it's a New York thing, but explain what Ringly is and how it works.
Yeah. So Ringly is one of these notifications wearables. Wearables do a million different things. Notifications is just one of them. And Ringly is it's a ring, and now they have a bracelet, and it's made with actual semi-precious jewels. It's not plastic, clunky type of thing. I almost wore mine today. I really love it.
Oh, I should have told you to wear it. I hadn't thought of it in advance.
It's a great product. But so it has a very small light and a very small vibrating motor. And so you as the consumer, as the wearer, can decide what you want to be notified about. So you can, they work with, it must be over 100 different apps now, but you can decide, I'm in a meeting, it's really important, but if the babysitter calls, I want to be interrupted for that. Or, the boss calls, or if my Uber shows up, or if my stocks tank, or whatever it is. And you can kind of set that. And so it's a piece of jewelry that you wear that privately tells you when you have a notification that's important to you. So if you are waiting for a call or you're wanting to make sure that you don't miss something, you can just put your phone away. You could keep it in your pocket or keep it in your bag. You don't have to keep getting it out and checking it, because Ringly will let you know if something important happens.
And I love that product because it solves a real problem.
Yes.
Whereas, yes, you can get a text message, but you have to check your phone. And if you check your phone, you have to scroll through all your notifications,
yes,
maybe your emails. Even your phone might be ringing too often,
right?
But Ringly you can set for just the few people that really need to get through. And it's subtle. So there's a reason why you're wearing it. It's not in your pocket. It's always on your hand. So you know you're never going to miss that call.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's an important thing to look at too when we're looking at how fashion and technology are blending together, and that the best examples of that are when the technology just disappears, just completely disappears. And hopefully whatever that wearable is something that is beautiful enough that you would wear it even if it didn't have that extra level of functionality. And that to me is the killer experience when I've worn my Ringly when it's not charged up, because I think it's a great looking ring. You know, if I had this fancy handbag, would I carry it even if it wasn't charging my phone, you know, or whatever that is? Is it something that is in and of itself beautifully designed and fashionable, or lets me express myself the way that I want to, even if it's not doing that techie thing?
I got you. Let's get a question in from the audience.
Is there any involvement with vibrotactile, extrasensory transducer technology or vest for assisting hearing impaired people?
I don't know.
Hearing impaired people. Okay, so like I said, we have a fairly technical audience.
Yeah.
And so wearable technology for the hearing impaired. Technologically, there's been tremendous advances in that space over the last couple of years. I don't know of anything in the fashion space or in the wearable space per se.
Yeah, that's a great question, because one of the things that is so wonderful about wearables is that we're actually starting to solve some real problems and do some things that are helping people and not just making their already easy lives easier. So there aren't necessarily things that I know of that are, quote, fashion tech, but there are some amazing wearables that are doing things for people that are hearing impaired or vision impaired. There's some really just beautifully designed products also for children with autism or people who suffer from seizure disorders. And a lot of those are starting to actually look like normal, quote unquote, normal products. The T-jacket is an example, which looks like a hoodie and functions just like a hoodie, and it's for children that have autism. It can actually, it connects with an app and it gives a hug. So that's one of the things for children that have different types of issues that they're grappling with, that sometimes there's a strong touch that can help them to feel better, and so they have control and they can have their jacket.
Self-soothe that way.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's, well, that doesn't answer that question directly. That's an example of one of the many different products that are coming out that are that look like your average product, but have that extra added functionality that is making the world a better place.
It seems like there's almost two different sort of paths in when you're building wearable technology. One of them is to try and replicate the computing experience in your clothing and give you displays and give you notifications and let you make phone calls. And then there's another type of device, Ringly would definitely qualify, where you're taking advantage of different sensory inputs, different locations on the body, how you wear it, and using a different sensation, using touch instead of an audible ringing, which everybody has turned off at this point, or even a vibration that you may not feel in your bag. By making it part of your wearable experience, you're taking advantage of a sense that you ordinarily wouldn't have access to.
Yeah, that stuff is so cool. There's a number of different companies that have shoes or shoe inserts. Have you seen those that use haptics, and you can actually get directions? So if you have to be walking somewhere for that to work, but if you're walking somewhere and you don't want to keep pulling your phone out to say like when do I turn, then it will actually just vibrate and let you know.
We should give those to everyone in New York City. Every tourist coming to New York City should get those.
It should say walk
as
faster
they come through
too.
Don't slow down. Pull
Speed
over.
Up. Keep going. Keep going.
I just want to have an alert that says, please pull over if you're going to check your phone.
Oh, don't cut me off and then check your text messages.
Okay, here we are. New Yorkers complaining about tourists. We've got another question from the audience. Oh, we do not have another question from the audience. Question sheep got lost.
Oh no, question sheep.
So, are there any other examples of companies that are doing this well? I know, Nike's been at the very forefront of this space from the very beginning, but mostly in terms of health and working out and exercise. But they've spent a lot of time and energy figuring out how to incorporate technology into all their products. Really.
Yeah. Nike's interesting because they're approaching it both from a fashion end and from a tech end. In the fashion end, they do a lot of mass customization I actually have on Nike mass customized shoes today. They have my name on them, Liza.
Nice.
That's my brand.
It's not a terrible brand.
Which a lot of the shoe companies are doing mass customization, and a lot of other companies as well. But yeah, they have, not just with the technology in the wearable space, but with the community as well. And I think that's where Nike has really shown. And, you know, we can get so much data from wearables, like data that we aren't really interested in and don't really know what to do with. But what they've done is actually given people information that's helpful in a format that works and a community that they can share that stuff in. Another example of a company that's doing well is a company called Wearable X, and I know you've seen the Natty X. I think
it's called Natty X.
Natty? It's probably not Natty.
Yeah, Natty X.
Okay, Natty X. So that's a pair of connected yoga pants, and so they have little sensors in them, and they have vibrators, and so it does the work of, let's say you were going to hire a private teacher that would kind of correct your pose, and so they're doing that. The pants will actually do that themselves. Billy Whitehouse.
We're trying to figure out who at PC Magazine is going to review those when they come out next month.
Oh,
so
why not?
We need someone that knows how to do at least a few yoga poses.
Anybody could do a basic yoga pose.
In order to test them out.
I nominate you, Dan.
Okay. I had the ones I've seen online probably wouldn't fit me. But it's an open question. We'll see who volunteers.
But I think that's a great example because the technology is actually embedded in the pants. And you would wear the pants normally. You wouldn't pay that price for them normally.
They're $300.
$300, that's right.
It's a lot for yoga pants.
Yeah, it is. Although the price of athleisure, if you will, or athletic wear is really going up and up these days. So some people would. But Billy Whitehouse, the founder of Wearable X, is doing some really cool and interesting stuff, and that's the product that they're bringing to market right now. But she's done some really cool stuff in the past. She had this connected fan jerseys, which is different than the fan jerseys that Nike just announced like today or yesterday.
Yeah, Nike was, I mean, it almost doesn't seem like a wearable. Nike was going to build NFC chips into the labels, and then you'd be able to unlock content by holding your phone near the jersey. So you've got a custom experience, it's custom content, but it doesn't really make the shirt any more intelligent. Or
No. Also, when was the last time you used
I haven't bought a fan jersey in a while.
or any of it? I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea. Also, the ad for it was like, I think it was really kind of over-promising because the ad for it was like, oh, if you use NFC to scan this jersey, you're going to be on a private jet with your favorite ball player, which is like, probably not.
Results may vary on that performance.
Exactly. But it's fun to see that different companies are trying that stuff out. But I do think it's important to note that that's just a marketing gimmick. It's not actually changing, like you said, it's not changing the actual fashion or the fabric or anything like that.
Right. We have another question from the audience. I'm sure we do this time.
How is the manufacturing process and product development for fashion changing now that technology is a consideration? For example, how are products tested? How do you determine where the tech should be embedded?
Yeah, that's a great question. By far the biggest challenge for companies that are trying to actually physically embed fashion with technology is the manufacturing process. It's less true now, thankfully, but there are so few companies, so few factories that are able to actually do both of those things. And so it's something that companies, brands are able to do in-house. They can prototype or make a small number of items, and they can certainly send out a press release and make a video and get it on the runway. But to actually manufacture things for the masses is a huge challenge. And so there are a number of factories right now that are investing heavily, and there are venture capitalists that are investing in those factories to try to make that something that can actually scale up. But for now, it's something that's really only done at a small kind of beta-ish level.
Do you think that those factories, is that an incentive for those factories to move back to the United States? Or are those factories just going to get up-leveled where they are?
I want the answer to be yes, that people will be moving back. But my anecdotal experience from the people that are working on those and the factories that have approached me personally is that they are overseas factories that are seeing what needs to change and are trying to move in that direction.
So you're wearing an Apple Watch.
Yeah.
The Apple Watch Series 3 is coming out. Let's talk about the Apple Watch. I mean, do you see that as a successful product? Tim Cook was just saying 2 weeks ago that it was the best-selling watch in the world.
I think, I don't know, Swatch would agree with that.
And I think Swatch is somehow not included in that metric, but what's your take on the Apple Watch, both present and future?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a piece of crap. I have gone to just wearing my Apple Watch as an actual watch. I mean, I'm not really using it for anything else at this point. I've tried all the different things, and I'm not really finding that there's much functionality there that makes my life better. I find that it was just another gadget that needed some care and feeding and like another place to get my notifications. What do you think?
Are you
wearing one?
I'm
No.
not. I'm on the Android universe somewhere in the Fitbit Blaze. But I think all trackers have sort of the same problem. First of all, they had to identify it as a fitness device, which they didn't want to do straight out of the gate. They wanted it to be this new smartwatch, but nobody really knew, other than notifications, which I think it does pretty well. It doesn't, what is that other application that you need it for? Or is it just letting you know when you get text messages? And I think that's still the best thing that it does. We'll see with the Series 3, now that they've got the cellular modem built in, now that you can make phone calls off of it, now that you can stream music from it, which I actually think is really, that is a killer application, is not having to bring your phone and being able to listen to music and make phone calls. That is genuinely useful, and that could be a game changer.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't do it a long, long time ago. I mean, several years ago, when I was working with Vodafone, and I hope I can say that, and some other companies, there was a real push towards trying to untether things and give them their own cellular connections. And I don't really understand why that didn't happen much sooner, because the cellular companies were wanting that to happen. I don't know if it was an adoption thing. So I think it will be interesting to see what happens, but I won't be spending the money to buy a new one just because it can do that, because I don't really know if it's going to, like I keep saying, make my life any better than it is.
This is, I mean, I made sure that I had my last Fitbit had a GPS. This one has a continual heart rate monitor, which is great. I'd love to be able to monitor my heart rate in real time constantly. That actually doesn't necessarily make my life any better. It doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't give me any actionable information. So I think you find a lot of these people even counting steps. I know when I've had a good day, and I know when I've had a bad day. And the fact that it's, that it gives me the exact number.
Yeah, that's true.
This is why most people they get tired of wearing them and they leave them in a drawer.
Yeah. After, I mean, I don't know what the latest statistics are, but yeah, we tend to enjoy the novelty for a little while and then stop doing it. And I think after you do that several times, after you get excited about a device and then it ends up in the drawer several times, then there's a really high barrier for people to actually say, like, okay, I'm going to take the leap on this one.
Yeah, especially for high-end devices that are $100, $200.
Yeah.
When you put those aside and you come back 6 months later, it's a lot of money to spend.
Yeah, you don't want to think about it. You see that sitting in a drawer because you don't ever get rid of them. They all just sit in a drawer and it's like in your face.
So I want to talk about some of the companies that are doing this badly, although we've covered a couple of them already. No shortage of shade being thrown around.
Oh boy.
Are there any other companies that that have tried to do fashion and technology and you've just looked at it and said they just got this terribly wrong?
Oh my gosh, there's so many, and I think part of the problem is that people aren't solving real and actual problems, and that's an issue across the board. That's not just something that fashion companies are doing or fashion tech companies are doing. But there are so many things that people are trying to do because they're saying, my husband often says that it's not a problem of technology, it's a problem of imagination. And I think that's really true, because we have the technology to do like basically anything right now. But the problem is that we're doing things that don't make any sense, or we're doing things because they're fun. He and I diverge at the idea of novelty, because I don't like novelty. I like things that are actually improving people's lives. And he likes novelty because he feels like it can be fun and it can add some joy and levity. And so he's the joyful one at home.
Okay, fair enough.
But what we're seeing is that there's like people that are not doing good in the world or are not actually solving those problems. And so, for instance, if I had $1 for every time a fashion tech company said that they built the Clueless closet, do you remember that movie?
I don't know what the Clueless closet is.
Do you know the movie? Okay. So Clueless is this movie, I don't know when it was, in the late 90s.
Alicia Silverstone?
Yeah, exactly. And there's this one scene, and it lasts like 6 seconds. It's so fast. And she's got this computer screen, and she's just kind of like scrolling on her outfits. And the implication is that it will give her some kind of feedback, although we don't really see it doing that. Every fashion tech startup says, I built the clueless closet, and they never have. And we have fashion tech companies that are saying, I've solved visual search. Just use my app, and you can take a picture, and I'll tell you what products or similar products. It just rarely works. And so we're seeing over and over again people kind of trying to build the same technologies or solve the same quote-unquote problems, and they're just spinning their wheels.
And I think it's interesting, too, that they're literally solving a problem that, hey, nobody said it was a problem.
Right.
And it was just randomly happened in a movie.
Oh my
It's like
20 years ago or something.
Vendors trying to recreate the Minority Report interface.
Exactly.
Because it was in a movie and it looked cool.
Exactly.
So we built it. And by the way, maybe that doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a terrible way to navigate information. But people don't ask themselves. They build it and then they try and get venture funding for it.
Right, yeah. And they get a little press. And that's, there's some things that are buzzier to write about than others. And so I feel like it kind of reinforces that for people.
All right. I feel like you're judging me just a little bit.
I am not.
We do a little bit of that on PCMag.com. Let's talk a little bit about the privacy issues, because I think when one of the great things about wearables is that you're collecting information you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. The new series of Apple Watch, Apple's already said they're very much going to be collecting all of this heart rate information so they can identify anomalies and then alert people when they have irregular heartbeats, which I think could be really cool. But it's also this idea that we're creating these data sets of all of our health information. And I don't think most people realize that when they strap on a Fitbit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What a huge issue that we're wading into without having any real idea of where it's going to lead. I mean, one of the things that concerns me a lot is that some of the biggest adopters of these, health wearables are insurance companies. And the promise is that, okay, if you get your 10,000 steps or you work out your 5 times a week or 3 times a week or whatever, that maybe you can have discounted rates or something. So there's this little bit of a promise to consumers in order to collect these enormous amounts of data. There's no evidence that we're going to save money if we let insurance companies access everything about us. And we're just giving up so much information. In so many different types of technology, we are the product. And we forget that so often. Or I think there's a large swath of the consumer public that doesn't necessarily understand that they're the product. And my hope is that the people that are building and designing wearables can actually be respectful of the human experience and focus on actually helping the people that are wearing the devices and not trying to turn around and sell the data. And it all comes down to the business models that they're based on, because there's different ways to do it. And I think some people will probably focus on selling the data, and some people will focus on offering helpful services.
Yeah, and you see the big tech companies sort of sorting into 2 different camps there. Google, very much a database business and advertising-based business. Apple, a little bit more respectful of individual privacy,
right,
and trying to make money on the hardware,
right,
not necessarily on the data and services that are going to get layered in later.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. And I think that it's important for consumers to really think about which model they want to get into. Like, how much is your free email worth?
I think people need to understand, too, it's very much like those progressive modules. Progressive Insurance will sell you these modules
right,
you plug into your car, and then they give you a discount for being a safe driver.
Right.
Your Fitbit and your Apple Watch could wind up becoming the same type of device.
Yes.
That allows the insurance company to price your insurance just on your particular risk, which may be great for you if you live a healthy lifestyle, but it could come with a downside if you don't have a healthy lifestyle.
Well, and a healthy lifestyle hopefully will keep you healthy, but there are other things that happen when, even if you live a healthy lifestyle, you can have sickness, and, do you really want to remain in that relationship when that sickness happens? You're talking about the heart rate. I actually had to stop checking my heart rate on my Apple Watch because if it would be a little bit elevated, then I would look at it, and then it would be a lot elevated. And I realized I was in this kind of self-reinforcing thing where when my heart rate was raised, it just kept going up.
Yeah,
so
that's a bad feedback loop. Yes. That's a bad feedback loop. I want to ask you some of the questions I ask everybody that comes on the show. What technological trends concern you the most? Is there anything that keeps you up at night?
Yeah, I mean, we've touched on that a little bit, but I think really when it comes down to it, the thing that worries me the most is how we are changing our interactions with each other. And it's technology more or less is a tool that can be used for good or for evil, although it's not necessarily neutral when we have humans programming the algorithms. Humans have inherent biases that are programmed into that. So it's not totally neutral, but on the surface it is. And so I think that we're at this place right now, such an important place where the decisions that we're making can really affect what kind of world we're going to be living in the not too distant future. And so what keeps me up at night is really just like really hoping and wanting for people to make good decisions based on whatever their value system is, to hopefully, narrow the digital divide and offer accessibility and connectivity in a way that enhances humanity.
All right. Well, that's why we're having these conversations. Is there a product or service that you've used that inspires wonder?
There are a couple of games on the iPhone that I love. And that word wonder, and I think you said awe also. Freaking Monument Valley, man. So, there's two of them now, so beautiful, and the Old Man's Journey. There are some really gorgeous things that are happening, and as much as technology can kind of bring us down, I think it can really awe and inspire us as well. And those games I recommend anyone spends the money and takes the time to play those. They're gorgeous.
It is interesting. This happened in the gaming market too. It's like after you hit all the mainstream segments, all of a sudden this really new creative type of game came out that provided a totally different experience. And I feel like now we're getting there in the mobile space, where yes, Candy Crush is still doing very, very well, and Bejeweled,
Balls.
And but then there's this other creative space where people are having a gaming experience, a creative experience on their mobile device that would have been unheard of 10
Oh my
years
gosh,
ago.
it's so beautiful to have an immersive game experience like that in your pocket. It really can change the way we look at our devices.
So, and I don't ask this question for everybody that comes on the show, but I'm going to ask you, is there a particular fashion faux pas that geeks generally commit?
Oh my gosh. I feel like people are expecting me to say socks with sandals.
There's probably someone in this office right now with socks and sandals.
It happens.
And his name might be Max.
Oh boy, Max. Well, I think the thing is pretending like you exist outside of the realm of fashion. And when we go somewhere, we show up, and whatever we decide to do with our appearance is how we're presenting ourselves into the world. So I think the biggest faux pas is not taking the time to care about how you present yourself.
Okay. So there's no hard target there. What about hoodies? What's your stand on hoodies?
I mean, I don't own one, but they look cozy.
All right. I think that is the final word. I think we can translate that. Thanks so much for coming by the lab and talking to us.
That was great. Thank you so much. That was great.
How can people find you online?
Yeah.
And keep up with what you're doing?
So if you're interested in what I'm doing, you can find me on Twitter at Liza K, Lizak, or on Instagram, Liza_K. Darn it. Or at thirdwavefashion.com or mindfultechnology.com.
All right, we'll have all of those in the show notes. Thanks so much for joining us today for Fast Forward. If you want to see past episodes of this show, you can find them on PCMag.com. You can find them on iTunes. You can find them anywhere that fine podcasts are given away for free. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'll see you in the future.